So go ahead and lie down. Take your time and just, just let yourself get adjusted to the floor. And slowly shift your attention to your breathing and just attend to your breathing, the rate, rhythm. Notice your breathing and starting to notice. Okay, so just all parts of yourself slowly as you attend to your breathing. Use your breathing to just kind of slow down and let yourself just arrive in this. Okay, hi Katie. Yeah, we're just starting. Yeah, when you're ready, you can go ahead and lie down. Okay? Take your time. So we're just starting with the scanning, lying down on your back, and so whether your legs are straight or the legs are bent, do whatever you feel comfortable. Okay? And starts to notice yourself, notice the contact of yourself against on the floor, and what parts of yourself you starts to pay attention first. Your legs, or your arms, your head, or your back. Okay, so start wherever your mind or your attention shifts to, and then from there, and shift your attention to another part, and starting to notice the different other parts of yourself and complete the image of yourself. So, taking your time, and I'd like you to notice the difference between the right side and the left side when you sense the right leg and compare the sensation and compare the contact and compare the weight and the difference between the right side and the left side. Notice which side feels closer to the floor, which side has more contact, and which side has more weight. Yeah, just to scan systematically so you get a sense how you're making a contact today with the floor. Okay, now shift your attention to your legs, your left leg and the right leg, and just notice from the heel, scan the weight and scan the contact from the heel to the hip on the left side, and shift your attention to the right side from the right heel all the way up to the right hip. Notice the sense and how you sense the contact with your legs, and notice your pelvis and how your legs connect to the pelvis. How does the right leg connect to the pelvis? And how is your left leg? How does your left leg connect to the pelvis? Is there any difference? The way that the right connects to the pelvis and the way that the left connects to your pelvis. And sense your spine, your lower back, your lumbar spine, and notice how it connects to your pelvis. Notice the space behind your back, how much space, and sense the shape of your arch, length, the width. Okay. And notice other parts of the spine, all the way up to the neck. How does the contact and the weight change? And sense the head the weight? How is the head resting? And how is the neck, your spine connect to the head? And sense your rib cage. What parts do you notice more clearly? Right side of the pelvis or the left side of the pelvis? And what part? The back side, or the side of the pelvis, or the front of the pelvis? What part is the most clear to you? What makes it more clear to you? And what parts of the rib cage is not so clear in your image? And what makes it not so clear? What makes it so vague? What is it? So how is the right side, the shape, and different from the left side? Is the right side longer, wider, shorter, narrower? Okay. Roll your head just once to the right, and just you're paying attention and you notice how the head rolls, smoothness or the not so smooth, or how does it roll to the right and back to the center, and roll your head to the left side and noticing the difference. How does your head roll to the left side, and how is it different? Is it easier, smoother? Is it harder, not as smooth? Not about how far it goes, but how smoothly does your head turn one direction, and how is it different in the other directions? Okay, bend your legs, please, both legs. And have your feet about the shoulder width apart. Have your knees about the shoulder width apart. And lift your right hip just a little bit away from the floor and let it come down. Okay, and notice how just your right hip lifts away from the floor, and then lift your left hip away from the floor. And notice how your left leg and left hip then lifts away from the floor. Easier, harder. And one more time, lift your right hip and down, and slowly, and lift your left hip. Okay. So remember the quality of the lifting the hip, right and the left. Okay, then we'll come back to this one at the end. So now, let's see. So bring attention to the mid spine, somewhere between your shoulder blades, and notice the contact of the mid spine against the floor. And lightly press that part of the spine into the floor, just a tiny bit. Press it down into the floor and then let go. Okay. And slowly repeat that movement. Make it very slow. And then when you release it, don't just let go, but let go slowly so you can feel how the pressure changes as you press and as you release. How does the contact of your spine changes? So you can feel what part of the spine that you are pressing. Okay, so do that several times. Press and release. Press and release. Does it change your breathing? What are you doing with your breathing? If you haven't paid attention, you pay attention to your breathing. Do you hold your breath? Do you inhale or do you exhale? Okay, so now that you are paying attention to your breathing, so try breathing out as you press your mid spine into the floor, and then as you let go, you can breathe in. So coordinate with your breathing, pressing and releasing. You see how that changes the movements. Okay. Now you stop that and take your hands, one hand or the both hands, it doesn't matter, on the lower part of the sternum. Okay? The lower part of the sternum. Your sternum is your breastbone, right? Okay. So place one or two hands on the lower part of the sternum, and then as you press, okay, so gently using your hand or the hands, and to gently press the lower part of the sternum down into the floor to press that part of the spine, just underneath that sternum into the floor. And then let it go. But don't squish it. Don't press it too hard with your hands. Just lightly, you are guiding your sternum, that lower part of the sternum, moving downward into that into the direction of the floor, and release it. So you can feel that movement of the sternum moving down, the lower part of the sternum moving down. At the same time, notice the top part of the sternum is coming up like a teeter-totter. One end moves, and then the other end, it moves into the opposite directions. Do with least amount of effort. If you're holding your breath, that's too much effort. Just gonna add in one more thing. As you're doing the same movements, and lift your shoulders, round your shoulders a little bit, so your the shoulders lift a little bit away from the floor as you press your sternum with your hands. But not so much that you are intentionally lifting your shoulders so much, but just as a result of pressing the sternum down and pressing the spine down into the floor, and shoulders are starting to move away from the floor slightly, rounding the spine, rounding the shoulders. And then when you release it, and then the shoulders return to the floor. So notice that relationship and connection. Your spine and your sternum and your shoulders, that kind of starts to participate in this movement together. Okay. Go ahead and bring your hands down on the floor by your side, and you can rest. You can rest with your legs straight or the bent. As you're resting, just to shift your attention to your lower back. And then the next movement, you're going to be pressing your lower back into the floor by tilting and lifting your the tailbone away from the floor just a little bit. Okay, and then you release it, but not that much of an effort. Just lightly, you're moving and pressing your lower back into the floor by lifting your tail away from the floor, and then release it. Okay, so now once you know what you're going to be doing next, and you may start doing that ever so slightly. It's not a big movement. If your abs are crumping up and you're doing too much, it's not a crunches. Enough that you can sense that space behind your back gets smaller or even touches the floor. But now you're pressing the different parts of your spine. And each time you do that, and find a way to move with less effort and with more ease and comfort, which means you gotta let go of some of the unnecessary effort. If any place that you sense discomfort or work and too much work and Then you reduce the effort. Do less, move slower, and continue to do that movement. So the movement becomes smoother. Okay. Now you stop that. And we're going back to pressing your mid-back, mid-spine between your shoulder blades. And at the same time, you lift your shoulders, round your shoulders as you press your mid-spine into the floor. And then you let go. And then you press the lower back into the floor and tilting the tail away from the floor, and then let go. So you are pressing in two different parts of the spine alternately. You press the mid back, let go. You press the low back and let go. So coordinate that movement and switching and pressing in different parts of the spine. And which part of the spine, which spine is easier to press for you? Mid spine or the lumbar, lower back? What makes it easier? And what makes the other side harder, the other part of the spine harder? How can you make it easier so they're both pressing the mid back or the lumbar back and the lumbar spine, and they're both just as easy? Okay, now you take a pause. Don't press anything, just stay there. Okay, so the next time you press both parts of the spine, your mid spine and your lumbar spine. So you do the combine of both movements, pressing both parts of the spine, and then release it. Distribute an effort, and so that you're not pressing one part of the spine more than the other part of the spine. If you're pressing one part harder than the other one, reduce that effort instead of trying to make the other part work harder. So reduce an effort on the part that is working harder. Do it in a way that breathing continues with no interruption. So you have to really think about breathing, but the breathing just continues and goes along with the movement. So no change in your breathing patterns. Okay, let's take a break. And if you're okay to rest with your legs straight, lie down and take a rest and observe any changes in your contact. How the spine makes the contact with the floor, as the pelvis makes the contact with the floor, how the rib cage makes contact with the floor. Has anything changed? Now you bend your right leg only, just the right. Not the left leg, right leg, right leg. Okay. Now from there, lift your right hip. Lift your right hip away from the floor. Make sure you have your right leg bent, not the left leg. Left leg is straight. Yep. It makes it easier to bend, to lift. Okay. So lift your right hip and then let it come down. Let it come down. So not a big lift, just a tiny lift, and then let go. Let the hip come back down to the floor. And repeat these movements. Not a big movement, small movements. Lifting your right hip smoothly and smoothly let go. Let it return. Observe how the weight shifts on your pelvis and observe how that movement transmits through your spine. How far up in your spine can you feel the movement, sense the movement? Turning, lifting your right hip. Okay. Now, stay there, okay, and put your hand, one hand or both hands on your sternum, somewhere in the middle. Okay, so you can feel your sternum with your hands, and as you lift your right hip, using your hand and then turn your sternum with a turn in your chest to the left as you lift your right hip. So the chest and your sternum turns to the left as you lift your right hip. Okay, and then let your pelvis and your sternum come back to the starting point. So continue doing these movements several times. You can just imagine and visualize that movement and transmits through the spine from your leg and the pelvis upward, and then it connects to your hands. And you're using your hands to support the movement of the pelvis. And you're turning your sternum, your chest to the left side. It shouldn't really take that much of work. Just the guidance. Your hand is just to support and to guide, to inform, not to force the movement, not to stretch it, not to put too much effort. But just to guide that movement. And then also to inform yourself that connection between the pelvis and your chest and sternum. Okay, so can your hands help the movement of the pelvis? Okay, so the gentle suggestion of your hands turning your sternum to the left side, turning your chest to the left side, invite your pelvis to turn to the left. Invite your right hip to lift away from the floor. You can also think differently. Can your pelvis, can the movement of the pelvis help the movement of your chest? So how can they work together? And can you sense the connection, pelvis and the chest? Okay, so now stop. So the next, you do the same movement with your hip. Lift your right hip, but using your hands, now turn your sternum and chest to the right. So it goes to the opposite directions. It's a little more tricky. So maybe you need to slow down the movements. It creates kind of strange twist in your spine. But can you sense that where the force and the movement of the chest and meet with the movement of the pelvis? They kind of turn and going in opposite directions. Where do they meet? Can your hands sense the movement and coming through your pelvis upward? Or can your pelvis sense the movement coming from your sternum downward? Where do they meet? Reduce an effort to make it easier and to make it lighter. So the quality becomes softer and lighter, right? And when the movement becomes softer and lighter, and the breathing quality changes too. Breathing becomes easier. Yep, very good. Okay. And now bend your left leg and straighten your right leg. So you switch your legs. And you can leave your hands on your chest. And begin to lift your left hip. And first you can listen with your hands, and when maybe that you can sense that force and the movement and transmitting through your pelvis upward, and you can maybe sense that movements in your hands, and you can maybe assist using your hands to turn your chest to the right. Your sternum, your chest turns a little bit to the right. So use your hands to support the movement of your pelvis. And notice what you do with your head, by the way. When you turn your chest to the right, as your head turn right or turn left, or do you keep your head still? I'm not really telling you to do anything specific. I'm just asking you to pay attention. Notice what you're doing. And that's it. Of course, you can feel free. You can, if you want to turn your head to the right, you can. You can turn your head to the left if you want to. How does that change the quality when you add the movement of the head one way or the other way? Does that change the quality of the movement? Okay. And now, same movement with your hip. Lift your left hip, but turn your chest and sternum to the left. So they go opposite directions. So how does that work for you? Is there any conflict? Do they fight? Do you hold your breath? Do you work harder? What do you do? The moment that movement becomes a little bit unfamiliar, it's a little more difficult, then what do? How does it change your breathing? How does it change the tension in other places? Your hands, your neck, your jaw, anywhere? Where they staying quiet? So those are the places that you can always pay attention when you're doing some movements. How am I moving? Okay, that'll let you know. And oftentimes, when you increase in effort, it shows up in different places. Commonly in your neck, shoulders, and jaw, your hands, your eyes, your tongue. So when you turn your chest and lift your hip in this way, and where do the forces, two forces meet? The chest turn to the left, you lift your left hip, where the two forces meet. Can your hands feel the movement of the pelvis coming up, or can the pelvis feel the movement of your chest, from the chest coming down to the pelvis? Okay. All right, let's take a pause. You can put your hands down on the floor and lengthen your legs, and take a pause to observe your contact again. So So how has the contact changed so far? Slightly different relationship to the floor, maybe? What parts are different? Can you sense the floor a little more clearly? Bend both legs. Okay. So have your legs shoulder width apart, knees shoulder width apart, roughly. And you can keep your hands, you can have your hand, one or two hands on your chest, on your sternum, somewhere on your sternum, and lift your right hip and turn your chest and the sternum to the left. So both turning to the left side, okay? And then let it come back to the starting point. And lift your left hip and turn your sternum and the chest to the right. So now you're turning to the left, to the right. So paying attention to notice the connection, okay? So the pelvis to the chest, your legs to the chest, and alternate. Lift your right hip and turn your chest, turn them to the left. And then return to the starting point and then lift your left hip and turn your chest and sternum to the right. So you're turning left and then right slowly. And you can do whatever you want with your head. If your head spontaneously turns to the opposite direction, you can turn your head to the opposite directions or turn to the left or the right. Either direction is fine. But as you're doing these movements and with your hands, really sense the connection, the movement from the pelvis to the chest. And how does the movement from the pelvis connect to your chest, to your hands? Not really to your hands, but to your chest. Then you can sense that with your hands. Okay, and now you change it so you are turning your chest and the sternum in the opposite directions. So when you lift your right hip, you turn your chest and sternum to the right. And then when you lift your left hip, you turn your chest and sternum to the left. Alternate. How you transition from one side to the other side? How it transition smooth, or it gets a little awkward and jerky? But pay attention to this, the transition from one to the next, from one side to the next side, the other side. So it continues and it flows from one direction to the other directions without any stop. Continuous line of the movement. Okay, very well. Let's take a pause. Arms down, legs down, and rest. So in a moment, we are changing the position. So you'll be lying on your stomach. But for those of you who have really difficult time lying on your stomach, you don't have to force yourself to be on your stomach. But if you can, lie on your stomach. And you can have your face turn in one directions, right or left. You can have your hands on either side of the face if that's comfortable for you. So your choice. Face turn to the right, face turn to the left. Because you're going to change positions anyways. So, and position of your arms and hands, do whatever is comfortable. Okay, so you can adjust. If you're more comfortable with your arms down by your side, that's fine too. Just do the best that you can, trying to make it somewhat comfortable. May not be the most comfortable position, but from there, just imagine, it's to feel the chest first. Okay, so to feel the contact of your sternum, your chest against the floor. And imagine that you are gluing your chest to the floor, so the chest will not move. Okay, so you're fixed to the floor somehow. And do very gentle movements, turning your pelvis to the left. So you lift your right hip away from the floor, the front of the pelvis, right to the, and then let it come down, and then turn your pelvis in the opposite direction. So you turn pelvis left and then a right, but not a big movement because your chest is now glued to the floor, so you can't really move. But pay attention as you begin to turn your pelvis, and when you start to sense the movement in around your chest. So what's the earliest moment that you can sense the connection? As you begin to turn your pelvis one direction and then go to the other directions. And can you sense that connection to your chest? Okay, so if the chest wasn't glued to the floor, and then it would turn. But when do you sense that connection to your chest? So you're not trying to really force it and trying to move it so much. But when the movement from the pelvis transmits upward through the spine, and you can sense that chest is wanting to turn, and that's as far as you go. That's as far as you go. It may not take that much of movement, even just not even a 1 inch movement, even a 1/4 inch movement. You can sense the movement maybe in your chest. Okay, turn your face to the other directions. And continue to do the same movements and turning your pelvis left and right. And still the chest is glued to the floor. So you can sense the movement on your sternum. As you move, you can sense the movement of the pelvis with your sternum. Very good. Okay, and go ahead and roll onto your back. Roll onto your back and then just rest on your back. Stay there for a little bit. Only one more time you'll be on your stomach, but not yet. Okay, I'll tell you when. So the next time you are going to be on your stomach, you're going to be on your elbows and forearms on your stomach. So your head is away from the floor. So you know if that's okay. Okay. If it doesn't work, my suggestion is that you just imagine doing the movements. Don't do the movements. Okay? But if you're okay, when you come up, prop yourself up on your elbows and forearms. So you lift your chest, lift your head away from the floor. So your shoulder is directly under your shoulders. Something like that. Okay. So from there, and so this time, imagine your pelvis is now glued to the floor. Your pelvis is. Okay. So the pelvis will not move. And you slowly, you're going to look over the right shoulder once, and then come back. And then slowly look over the left shoulder. Okay. As if you wanted to see just behind your left shoulder. And then as if you wanted to see behind your right shoulder. So do that a few times. And of course, if you get tired, just rest. But pay attention as you are turning and looking over the right shoulder, and notice what happens to the shoulders, or what you do with your shoulders. Do the shoulders move, or do the shoulders stay still? Okay. Then as you turn and look, not just to turn in the head, but you are looking over the left shoulder, then what happens to the shoulders? Okay, so pay attention. When you turn and look over the right shoulder, and do you notice the right shoulder maybe could move backwards a little bit? And as you look over the left shoulder, and can the left shoulder move backwards a little bit? So you are now paying attention to what you might be able to do with your shoulders and how that can assist the movement of the head. So when you look over the right shoulder, left shoulder moves forward and right shoulder moves backwards. What happens then? When you look over the left shoulder and left shoulder goes backwards and the right shoulder moves forward, what happens? Okay, just a few more times and I'll have you come down and rest on your stomach. Yeah. There you go. And lower yourself down. You can rest on your stomach like that. Okay. So while you are resting, okay, and just imagine you are in the same position as before. You are on your hand, the forearms and elbows, and doing the same movements, looking over the right shoulder, looking over the left shoulder. Just imagine doing that now. Okay. So as you begin to slowly look over the right shoulder and paying attention now to the shoulder blades. Right shoulder blades moving towards the spine, and at the same time the left shoulder blades moving away from the spine. And then when you starting to look over the left shoulder and the left shoulder blades starting to move towards the spine, at the same time the right shoulder blade moves away from the spine. It's okay. So let's come back onto the same positions on your elbows and forearms, if you are able to, if you can, and if you are willing to. You don't have to, right? You can always say no. All right, so go ahead and do that movement. Same movements with your head, looking over the right shoulder. Now you're paying attention to your shoulder blades. So how can the shoulder blades participate in the movement? Does that change the movement of the head? So you really think that you are wanting to look over the shoulder, not just to turn the head to the left or the right, looking over the shoulder, behind, so you can see behind your shoulder. So just thinking about the shoulder blades and paying attention to shoulder blades, how does that change the movement of your head? Yeah, change something. But remember, your pelvis is still glued to the floor. At some point, you can feel, oh, the pelvis is wanting to move, but they're glued to the floor. The pelvis is glued to the floor. So that's as far as you can go. But at least you know that connection. There is some connection from the shoulders, your chest to the pelvis. And if you can sense that, That's plenty. All right, lie down on your back. Let's take a rest. Okay, so the next position will be the last position. You're going to be, not right away, I'll describe a position first so you know where you're going next. So you're going to be on your left side, and on your left side, you put your right leg standing behind your left leg. Okay. So you can use your pillow to support your head, but if that's not clear, maybe I can show you too. Like that. So you're going to stand your right leg on the floor. So the knee is pointing up towards the ceiling, somewhat like that. Okay. Okay, so the point is, yeah, your right leg is behind your left leg, and your foot is standing. Okay, so from there, take your hand or the hands on your chest, on your sternum. Right hand only, or both hands, whatever works for you. So you can feel the chest, you can feel the sternum with your hands, and then now what you're going to do is push through your right leg and to let your pelvis turn forward towards the floor as you push through your leg. Okay, and then can you allow that force to go through the spine, and so that you can sense the movement with your hand. So the chest is also turning to the floor, towards the floor. So push through the right leg, push through your right foot, and allow your pelvis and the chest turn forward towards the floor. Okay. Can you feel the movement is actually coming and transmitting through the foot? Okay, by pushing through your foot and then allowing the force to transmit through your legs and through your spine and into your hands, so that everything's kind of starting to turn into that direction. So the connection, okay, from the ground, from the foot, and through your legs, through the pelvis and the spine, to the chest. So there really shouldn't be any effort in your chest, because you're using the ground, you're using your foot, and to move yourself and gently and lightly. So it should feel pretty easy to do. If it feels difficult, and if you feel effort to do that, then you're probably using something that is not necessary, or something is probably stopping you from moving. Okay, but the point is that, can you sense the connection? Your leg, your pelvis, and your chest. The moment that you push through your foot, and how does the movement and the force transmit through the bones, through the skeleton? Okay, is there a connection between your right foot and your chest and your head? And how much of a really push do you need to sense that connection? How light of the pressure can you use to still sense the connection? Not much. Not much. Okay. And now slowly go ahead and turn to the other directions, to the right. So you're going to have your left foot behind your right. So the same positions, but the opposite side, the other side. And you can have your hand or the hands on your chest and do the same movement. So how clear is the connection between your left foot and your pelvis and your chest? Is it more clear on this side? Not as clear on this side. It's not the same, right? For some, more clear. For others, not as clear. So what's your connection? How do you sense the connection between your foot, leg, pelvis, spine, and your chest and your head on this side? How light of the pressure can you use and still sense the movement all the way through the chest and the head? The lightest pressure, pushing through your left foot. And can you feel that the pelvis and your chest and begin to turn forward towards the floor? Not much effort. Light, light. And what you can't do is you can experiment the placement of your left foot. And that might change how that movement transmits through you. So you can have your foot a little bit downward or a little bit outward, or just change position slightly and notice how that changes the movement, transmission of the force. Some places are probably not as clear, in other places and positions maybe a little more clear transmission and feels maybe a little lighter and easier. So try a different place, a few different places anyways. Yeah, very good. And let's stop that and roll onto your back. Lie on your back and have your legs bent. Bend your legs. Okay. And from there, lift your right hip and bring it down and lift your left hip. Do it a few times. Lift your right, lift your left, lift your left pelvis, left side of the hip. Alternate right and the left. And notice how this movement goes now and feels, and compared to the first time you did it. Smoother, easier. And even without putting your hands on your chest, and can you sense the movement through yourself? How far up through you can you sense this movement? Just simple movements and lifting right one hip and lift the other side of the hip. And how far up through you can you sense this movement? Okay, that's enough. Slowly put your legs down, long, and last time, and scan your contact from your legs and how your legs connect to the pelvis. How you sense how your legs connect to the pelvis. And connect to your spine, the pelvis connecting to the spine. A connection between the pelvis and your chest and your head. So how do you sense your connection? Different parts. How your legs connect to your torso and connect to the head, and how your arms connect to your torso and your head and your legs. So notice the contact of your spine, contact of the ribs, and roll your head to the right, roll your head to the left once each directions, and notice how your head turns and changes in the quality of the movements from the beginning. Okay. And now you leave that and slowly you're going to come up to stand. So you roll to the side and come to stand on your feet. Stand on the mat or stand on the floor anywhere, and just somewhere firm, comfortable, and steady. And just sense, just get your balance here in standing, and sense your feet, and sense the legs from the heels up to the hips, and sense your pelvis and your spine and your head. So all those parts and skeletons and how they are lined up. And move your right foot just a little bit forward on the floor. Take like a half step. Okay. Just right foot a little bit forward on the floor, and then put your hands, or the hand, one hand or both hands on your chest. Okay. So as you're standing with your right foot forward, and shift your weight, push through your left foot, and to shift your weight forward over the right foot. And then coming back to the middle, push through your left foot, and then coming back. So do that a few times, alternate, and sense the connection as you push through your left foot. And how does the transmission of the force? How does the force and transmit through the leg into the chest? Okay, so you can imagine that force is coming through your leg and up to the spine into the chest. So bring in the chest forward over the right leg as you push through your left foot. Okay, and switch your legs. So your left leg is a little bit forward, right leg's backwards, and put your hands on your chest and then push through your right foot. And to transfer the weight over to the left. And sense the connection from the foot to the chest. And using that connection, using that force, pushing through your foot and moving your chest forward over the left leg and back. There. Okay. Now, you can let go and take a walk around. Just as you're walking around, maybe pay attention to the connection. And as your foot pushes here, as you push through your foot, and how does that force and transmit through you? And how does that move you? So how your legs connect to your chest as you're walking, pushing through your feet, pushing through your foot. And how does that connect to your chest? Okay.